Donald Trump had experienced many strange mornings in his life. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for this one. He slowly opened his eyes. The bed was gone. The ceiling was gone. Even the walls had disappeared. Instead, he was lying on a cold, uncomfortable rock. A freezing wind hit his face. Birds screamed overhead. Somewhere in the distance came a loud, "Yuga." Trump blinked. "Okay." Another voice answered, "Uga." He sat straight up. "Where am I?" His hand instantly reached for his phone. Nothing. He checked his pockets. Nothing. Wallet? Gone. Watch? Gone. He looked around. No roads. No buildings. No cars. No helicopters. Just endless grass. Huge mountains. And a herd of giant woolly mammoths slowly walking across the valley. Trump stared at the mammoths. The mammoths stared back. After a long silence, he nodded. "Nice coats." One mammoth snorted. Trump nodded again. "I'll take that as a compliment." A rustling sound came from nearby bushes. 3 cavemen suddenly jumped out. One carried a spear. One carried a club. The third carried a fish. Why was he carrying a fish? Nobody knew. Maybe it was emotional support. The 3 surrounded Trump. Nobody spoke. Finally Trump smiled. "Good morning, gentlemen." The cavemen looked at each other. "Yuga." "No, no." "Good morning." "Yuga." "We're getting close." The tallest caveman slowly walked forward. He poked Trump's suit. Then his tie. Then carefully sniffed it. Then tried to pull it off. "Easy." Trump grabbed it. "This tie costs more than your entire cave." The caveman didn't understand a single word. But he liked the shiny fabric. He pointed at it excitedly. "Yuga." Within seconds, every caveman was pointing at the tie. "Yuga. Yuga. Yuga." 5 minutes later, Trump's tie had become the most famous object in the Stone Age. The strangers escorted him to their village. In the center stood the largest cave. Outside sat the chief. He looked enormous. His beard was longer than Trump's entire arm. One hand held a giant wooden club. The other held a roasted mammoth leg. Trump looked impressed. "I've got to admit, that's a serious lunch." The chief tore off a huge piece of meat and handed it to him. Trump tasted it. He nodded. "Not bad. Needs a little salt." The entire tribe froze. Salt? Nobody knew what salt was. Within seconds, 3 hunters sprinted into the forest looking for the mysterious creature called salt. One searched inside a tree. Another searched the river. A third suspiciously examined a mammoth. Trump sighed. "I think I just accidentally created the Department of Salt." Later that afternoon, Trump decided to inspect the local economy. Hunters returned with deer. Fishermen carried baskets of fish. Families collected berries. Everyone smiled. Nobody looked worried. Trump stopped the first hunter. "Excuse me. How much tax did you pay on that deer?" The hunter blinked. "Yuga." "No." "Income tax." "Yuga." "Hunting tax." "Yuga." "Property tax." "Yuga." "Sales tax." The hunter simply shrugged. Trump walked away. He stopped another hunter. "What about you?" "No taxes." "Yuga." Another.
"No taxes."
"Yuga." Another.
"No taxes."
"Yuga." He asked nearly everyone in the village. The answer never changed. Finally he stood in the middle of the camp, completely speechless. "Wait. You mean there are no taxes?" The entire tribe cheered. "Ogea." Trump slowly sat down on a nearby rock. He looked completely horrified. "I've seen some wild places in my life. But this is absolute chaos." 10 minutes later he had a plan. He found the biggest flat stone in the village, placed it near the entrance, sat behind it, collected 3 small rocks, then proudly announced, "Congratulations! You now have a tax office." The cave people looked confused. There wasn't one before. There is now. One hunter happened to walk past carrying a giant wild boar. Trump smiled like a banker spotting free money. "Perfect. Sir, I'll need your hunting tax." The hunter smiled politely. "Yuga. Hunting tax. Only 1 ham." The hunter looked at the boar, then at Trump, then quietly turned around and walked away. "Excuse me. You forgot to pay." The hunter didn't even look back. Trump grabbed a stick and scratched something into the dirt. First tax evader. Then he thought for a second and added another note. Very fast tax evader. A fisherman came next. Trump brightened immediately. "Excellent. Fishing tax." The fisherman frowned. "River usage fee." He looked even more confused. "Water maintenance fee." The fisherman scratched his head. "Wet feet surcharge." The fisherman stared. "And?" Trump smiled proudly. "Environmental fish appreciation fee." The fisherman slowly picked up his fish, looked at Trump, then quietly walked away without saying a word. Trump sighed. Another note appeared in the dirt. Second tax evader. These people are impossible. Just before sunset, a cheerful woman arrived carrying a basket full of berries. Trump rubbed his hands together. Finally, a responsible taxpayer. The woman smiled. Trump opened an imaginary notebook. Let's see. Berry tax. Basket tax. Forest entry fee. Sunshine tax. And he looked directly at her. A happiness tax. She stopped smiling. Very slowly, she placed the basket on the ground, reached behind her back, and pulled out the biggest club Trump had seen all day. He immediately raised both hands. Good news. Today only. Happiness tax is completely free. The woman smiled again, put the club away, picked up her berries, and walked off. Trump watched her disappear into the forest, then quietly muttered to himself, "I've made an important discovery. If I want people to pay taxes, I probably need to become chief first." And somewhere in the distance, a mammoth laughed. Or at least, it certainly sounded like it. The next morning, Trump woke up with a brand new business plan. He stretched, looked around the village, and smiled. Yesterday, nobody paid taxes. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. So the problem isn't the taxes. It's customer service. He snapped his fingers. What this place needs is government. By sunrise, the biggest rock in the village had become an office. Using a piece of charcoal, Trump proudly wrote, "Department of Everything." Under the sign sat exactly 1 government employee. Donald Trump. The first customer was a young hunter carrying a broken spear. Trump smiled professionally. "Welcome. How may I help you today?" The hunter held up the broken spear. "Yuga. I see. You'll need the Department of Spears." Trump stood up, walked 3 feet to the left, sat on another rock. "Good morning. Department of Spears. How may I help you?" The hunter blinked. "Yuga. First, I'll need your application." The hunter looked confused. "What application?" Trump looked around. There was no paper.
No pen. No clipboard.
He smiled anyway. "Simple. Just nod." The hunter nodded once. "Excellent. Application approved. Now you'll need permission from the Department of Trees." Trump walked 3 feet to the right. Sat down again. "Department of Trees. What kind of stick are we talking about today?" The hunter stared for a full 10 seconds, then quietly walked away. Trump grabbed a stick and wrote another note in the dirt. Customer left, satisfied. By lunchtime, the government had expanded dramatically. There was now the Department of Mammoths, the Department of Fire, the Department of Fish, the Department of Berries, the Department of Rain, the Department of Rocks, the Department of Bigger Rocks, the Department of Smaller Rocks, the Department of Sleeping, the Department of Loud UGAs, and, most importantly, the Department of Departments. Every office had exactly one employee. Trump. At one point he even started answering his own questions. Hello. Department of Mammoths speaking. He moved one seat over. Hello. This is the Department of Everything. I'll transfer your call. He moved back. Thank you for waiting. Nearby, a little cave boy whispered to his father. Who's he talking to? His father shrugged. Probably invisible people. That afternoon Trump unveiled his next masterpiece. The first Stone Age national bank. The bank occupied an empty cave. Above the entrance he proudly carved, "We keep your stuff safe." The first customer was a fisherman carrying 5 fish. Excellent. Trump said. You'd like to make a deposit? The fisherman smiled. Yuga. Trump carefully placed the fish behind him. There. Your investment is secure. The fisherman waited, then pointed at the fish. Yuga. You'd like them back? The fisherman nodded. Trump coughed awkwardly. Unfortunately, the bank is experiencing temporary liquidity issues. The fisherman blinked. Trump smiled confidently. It's a financial term. The fisherman didn't understand. Neither did Trump. The next customer arrived carrying a mammoth skin. Wonderful. Trump said. A premium account. He accepted the skin. Then handed the hunter a tiny pebble. What's this? It's your receipt. The hunter looked impressed. 5 minutes later he returned. Pointed at the mammoth skin. Yuga. You'd like to withdraw? The hunter nodded. Trump sighed. Withdrawals are currently unavailable. Why? We're protecting long-term value. The hunter scratched his head. So? No skin. No skin. The hunter walked away looking deeply confused. Trump smiled proudly. Banking. Business exploded. By sunset people had deposited meat, fish, animal skins, berries, bones, shiny rocks, even one chicken. Nobody knew where the chicken had come from. But somehow, it had opened a savings account. The following morning the entire village stood outside the bank. Everyone wanted their belongings back. Trump peeked outside. Saw the crowd. Slowly closed the cave entrance. Closed for maintenance. Someone shouted, "What maintenance?" Trump looked around. There will be maintenance. Once I think of some. That afternoon inspiration struck again. We need money. There wasn't any paper. So Trump painted rocks. A red rock. 1 mammoth coin. A blue rock. 5 mammoth coins. A green rock. 10. A shiny yellow rock. 100. A little girl raised her hand. Why is the yellow one worth more? Trump smiled. Because it's prettier. 5 minutes later every child in the village was painting rocks yellow. Within an hour, there were approximately 12 million mammoth coins in circulation. Trump looked around. I may have created inflation. A little boy proudly announced, I'm a billionaire. Another replied, I'm a trillionaire. A third had accidentally become richer than the entire village. Because he'd found a bucket of yellow paint. Still, Trump wasn't discouraged. He simply introduced more taxes. Standing on top of a giant boulder, he proudly announced, Attention everyone. New taxes are now in effect. The tribe groaned. Club tax. Spear tax. Berry tax. Mammoth tax. Fire tax. Cave tax. Second cave tax. No second cave tax. One hunter frowned. Wait. If I have 2 caves, I pay. If I don't, I also pay. Exactly. The hunter blinked. That's impressive. Trump smiled proudly. I've been told that before. He wasn't finished. There will also be a hair tax. Everyone looked at Trump's hair. He quickly added, exceptional hairstyles are exempt. The tribe nodded. Fair enough. A beard tax. One old man with a beard down to his knees gasped. A loud snoring tax. Half the village looked at one particularly large hunter. He slowly backed away. A campfire smoke tax. A fresh air tax. The tribe froze. Nobody breathed. Trump panicked.
No.
You can breathe. It's only. He paused. Under consideration. Everyone inhaled at once. Trump immediately smiled. Excellent. I'll call that a breathing demonstration. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Trump climbed onto the biggest rock in the village. He looked over the entire tribe. The bank. The departments. The painted rocks. The imaginary government. He nodded proudly. Everything is ready. There is only one thing left. He grabbed a piece of charcoal and wrote enormous letters across a giant cliff. Make caves great again. The tribe gathered to admire it. Nobody could read. One little boy finally asked, "What does it say?" Trump smiled. It says, "I'm going to be your next chief." The cave people looked at each other, then at the giant letters. Then one hunter shrugged. I still can't read. But I have to admit, they're very big letters. The entire village nodded in agreement. And somehow, that was enough to start the first election campaign in human history. The next morning, the entire village woke up to a strange sound. Clank, clank, clank. Trump had been awake since sunrise, carving campaign slogans into giant rocks. The first one read, "Make caves great again." The second said, "A mammoth for every family." The third proudly declared, "Less hunting, more winning." The cave people gathered around. They stared at the giant rocks. One little boy scratched his head. What does it say? Trump smiled. It says your future is going to be incredible. The boy nodded. He still couldn't read, but it certainly looked important. By noon, Trump announced the first political rally in Stone Age history. He climbed onto the tallest boulder in the village, spread his arms dramatically. My fellow citizens. Silence. My friends. Nothing. My voters. Still nothing. Trump sighed, then shouted, Yuga. The entire village exploded with excitement. Ogea. Trump grinned. There we go. Now we're communicating. He raised one finger. If I'm elected chief, every family gets a bigger cave. Wild cheering. Every hunter gets a stronger spear. More cheering. Every child gets their own baby mammoth. The children screamed with excitement. An old hunter slowly raised his hand. We only have 15 mammoths. Trump smiled confidently. That's a problem for the next administration. The crowd nodded. That sounded surprisingly reasonable. He continued. Every Monday. Holiday. The crowd cheered. Every Tuesday. Also holiday. Even louder. Wednesday. Festival day. Thursday. Recovery day. Friday. Preparation for the weekend. One young hunter looked confused. When do we hunt? Trump thought for exactly 2 seconds. Saturday. What if we don't catch anything? Sunday. When do we rest? Trump smiled proudly. I already solved that. Monday. The hunter blinked. But Monday is already a holiday. Exactly. See how organized I am. At that moment, the real chief stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He simply lifted his enormous club, then shouted, "Yuga!" The entire tribe answered, "Ugawea." Trump quietly whispered, "Strong approval ratings." The village elders decided there should be an official election. But first, each candidate had to pass 3 challenges. The first challenge: strength. The chief walked over to an enormous boulder. With one mighty roar, he lifted it over his head. The village erupted into applause. Trump stepped forward confidently. He grabbed the same rock, pulled, grunted, turned red, pulled harder. The rock didn't move even an inch. Trump immediately stood up straight. I wasn't trying to lift it. I was testing the quality. Excellent rock. Very stable. The villagers burst into laughter. Even the chief smiled. The second challenge: speed. The candidates had to catch a deer. The chief disappeared into the forest. 10 minutes later, he returned carrying a deer over one shoulder. The tribe cheered again. 20 minutes later, Trump finally walked out of the woods. Without a deer, but carrying a giant bouquet of flowers. The chief looked confused. "Where's the deer?" "It escaped." "Why?" Trump shrugged. "It was intimidated by my leadership." The tribe laughed even harder. The third challenge surprised everyone. Wisdom. 2 hunters were arguing over a mammoth. My spear hit first. "No." My club finished the job. The elders turned to Trump. "Can you solve it?" Trump smiled. He drew a large circle in the dirt, then divided it into sections. "Simple. The front half goes to you. The back half goes to you. The skin belongs to both of you. The tusks." He paused dramatically. "Go into a museum." The hunters stared. "What's a museum?" Trump smiled. "I have absolutely no idea. But it sounds expensive." After thinking for a moment, both hunters agreed. The elders looked amazed. It was the first argument in village history that ended without anyone getting hit with a club. Feeling unstoppable, Trump rolled out his biggest campaign promise yet. A giant stone tablet. Across the top he had carved the Stone Age budget. The tribe leaned closer. Trump cleared his throat. "Our income will come from mammoth tax, spear tax, berry tax, fish tax, campfire tax, cave tax, big cave tax, small cave tax, extra cave tax, no cave tax." The tribe looked increasingly worried. He wasn't even close to finished. Hair tax, long hair tax, very long hair tax, luxury hair tax. Everyone slowly looked at Trump's hair. He smiled awkwardly. "Presidential hair is exempt." He flipped the stone over. "There will also be sunlight tax." The tribe looked at the sky. "Rain tax." They looked at the clouds. "Shadow tax." They looked at the trees. "Walking tax." Everyone looked at their feet. "Breathing tax." The entire village stopped breathing. Trump waved his arms. "No, no. Breathe. It's only a proposal." The whole tribe inhaled at once. Trump quickly grabbed a stick. "Excellent. I'll call that the National Breathing Census." A little cave boy raised his hand. "What if someone doesn't pay?" Trump smiled. "Then they get a fine." "What if they don't pay the fine?" "They get a bigger fine." "What if they don't pay that one?" Trump folded his arms confidently. "They'll receive a very serious letter." The little boy looked around. "We don't have letters." Trump paused. "That's actually a pretty good point." Just then, a scout came sprinting into the village, completely out of breath. He pointed toward the hills. "Yuga." Everyone turned. The ground began to shake. Birds exploded into the sky. Trees trembled. The chief grabbed his club. Hunters picked up their spears. Trump smiled the biggest smile of his life. Perfect. My biggest taxpayers have finally arrived. Over the hill appeared one mammoth, then another, then 5, then 10, then dozens. The largest herd anyone had ever seen. The tribe looked terrified. Trump looked thrilled. He rubbed his hands together. I've got about 50 brand new tax ideas. The chief looked at Trump, then looked at the charging mammoths, then back at Trump. For the first time, he wasn't sure which one was more dangerous. The thunder grew louder. The ground shook beneath everyone's feet. Dust filled the air. The herd of mammoths charged toward the village like a furry avalanche. The cave people panicked. Hunters grabbed their spears. Children ran for cover. The chief raised his club. Only one man looked delighted. Donald Trump. He clapped his hands together. Ladies and gentlemen, my biggest taxpayers have arrived. He dragged the largest flat stone he could find into the middle of the path. Using a piece of charcoal, he quickly wrote, "Toll booth." Then underneath, "Mammoth tax collection point." He stepped into the middle of the road and raised one hand. "Halt!" To everyone's surprise, the first mammoth actually slowed down. The village held its breath. Trump smiled confidently. "Good afternoon. According to the new Stone Age Revenue Act, you owe 1 mammoth coin." The mammoth blinked. "And because your tusks are unusually large, luxury tusk tax." The mammoth continued staring. "You also owe grass consumption tax, long hair tax, heavy footstep tax, and..." Trump grinned proudly. "A flatulence emissions fee." The mammoth leaned forward. Trump smiled even wider. "I knew you'd understand." Instead, the mammoth sneezed. The blast knocked Trump's tie over his shoulder. His hair stood straight up. The tribe burst into laughter. Trump fixed his hair. "That's rude. You'll be fined." The mammoth lowered its trunk, picked up the giant tax sign, examined it carefully, then crushed it into tiny pieces with one enormous foot. Crunch. Trump stared at the pile of broken rocks. "I'll count that as a negative review." The mammoth let out a deafening trumpet. Instantly, the entire herd charged. "Run!" Trump screamed. "I officially suspend all taxes." Nobody waited for a second invitation. The greatest chase in Stone Age history had begun. Trump ran first. The chief ran beside him. Behind them came the entire village. Behind the village came 30 furious mammoths. Even a saber-toothed tiger saw the stampede. Thought about joining. Then wisely decided, nope, and ran in the opposite direction. While sprinting for his life, Trump continued giving speeches. "Stay calm." A mammoth almost stepped on him. And, preferably, run faster. He jumped over a fallen tree. The chief jumped over it. The hunters jumped over it. One mammoth tripped. Another crashed into him. Suddenly the entire herd became a giant traffic jam of wool, tusks, and very confused mammoths. The village stopped to catch its breath. Trump dusted off his suit. "You see. Leadership." The chief looked impressed. Then the first mammoth untangled itself. Trump looked over his shoulder. "Leadership has officially ended. Run again." Eventually, the mammoths wandered away. The tribe cautiously returned home. Silence. Nobody spoke. The village was unrecognizable. The tax office, gone. The Department of Everything, flattened. The National Bank, reduced to a pile of rocks. Millions of mammoth coins were scattered everywhere. Children were happily using them to skip across the river. One little boy shouted, "I'm the richest kid in history." Another replied, "I'm even richer." A third proudly announced, "I own the bank now." Trump sighed. Hyperinflation. It happens faster than you'd think. Among the rubble he found one surviving stone tablet. It read, "Fresh air tax." He stared at it for a long moment, then quietly smiled. He lifted the stone, broke it in half, and tossed it into the campfire. The tribe watched silently. Trump took a deep breath. From this day forward, no more air tax. The tribe cheered. No more rain tax. Even louder cheering. No more cave entrance tax. No more cave exit tax. No more berry tax. No more fish tax. No more mammoth tax. The chief slapped him on the back so hard he nearly fell into the fire. It was the Stone Age version of a standing ovation. That evening the entire tribe gathered around the campfire. Mammoth meat roasted over the flames. Children laughed. The hunters shared stories. The chief walked over carrying the biggest piece of mammoth. He handed it to Trump. "For me." The chief nodded. "Free." Another nod. "No service charge." "Yuga." "No convenience fee." "Yuga." "No processing fee." "Yuga."
No mandatory tip.
The chief looked confused. Trump laughed. "I was just checking." He took a bite. It was delicious. For the first time since arriving, he wasn't thinking about money, or taxes, or elections. He was simply enjoying dinner with friends. The following weeks changed everything. Trump never reopened the tax office. He never printed another mammoth coin. He never built another government department. Instead, he helped organize hunting teams, designed better spears, created a fair trading system between neighboring tribes. He even invented games for the children using smooth stones instead of arguing over them. Little by little, the village became stronger. Not because of taxes, but because everyone worked together. One evening, the chief approached him carrying a necklace made from mammoth tusks. Without saying a word, he placed it around Trump's neck. Then he raised Trump's hand high into the air. The entire tribe erupted. Ogawa. Trump smiled.
"So,
I won the election." The chief laughed, then shook his head. He pointed to his own heart, then to the people, then to Trump. No words were needed. Trump finally understood. A real leader isn't the one who creates the most rules. A real leader is the one people willingly choose to follow, even if he occasionally tries to tax the air. Suddenly, everything faded. A bright flash filled the sky. Silence. Trump opened his eyes. He was back in his bedroom. Soft bed. Warm blanket. Modern furniture. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A voice came from the hallway. "Mr. Trump, your economic advisors are waiting. They'd like to discuss tax policy." Trump slowly sat up. He looked out the window, then smiled to himself.
fine.
But let's agree on one thing. His assistant opened a notebook.
I'm listening.
No air tax. Of course. No rain tax. Certainly. And absolutely. Trump paused. No mammoth tax. The assistant frowned.
I'm sorry.
What's a mammoth? Trump looked into the distance. For just a second, he could have sworn he heard a familiar trumpet echo across the horizon. He smiled. You wouldn't believe me. Somewhere, in another time, a herd of mammoths wandered peacefully across a green valley.
No taxes. No paperwork.
No government offices. Just fresh air, free sunshine, and one very happy cave tribe.